Have you seen hiring managers producing content for TA functions to help them from a talent engagement or candidate engagement perspective?
Time.
What, to pick up a mobile and do a quick 30-second for a role that they've had empty for 3 months and people are struggling in a tight talent market?
No.
Just saying.
Yes.
What if we just get past the candidate experience BS that we keep talking about, but don't really do much about it?
Okay. And what is that BS?
I think it's just us talking, these two words, candidate experience, we talk about it a lot. You see it a lot in the industry. The Virgin Media candidate experience example that's been around the block. I don't know how many times I've heard it, but you haven't really heard anyone talk about it again. Or actually replicate it and say, we did it as well. But we can see, like last year, if you see, like, obviously there's lots of people looking for work last year and into this year, we can see that actually fundamentally the experience and job hunting still fundamentally is flawed, and the experiences people have of companies still remains not particularly great. And if it was an airline, would it be better or worse than Ryanair? I don't know. I think worse. So who knows?
Ryanair has a great TikTok account. Just want to say.
I think Ryanair is, for what it is, you get on, you don't think about it, and you get off, and it's all good, and it's cheap.
But okay. So what was that Virgin example that you're talking about first?
So there was the example, so I know the guys that did it, PH Creative were very much involved in that, the boys there, who got, good guys, and Graham, who's the old head of TA, and they decided to work out, okay, so what is the fundamental cost, or is it truly impacting our customer experience or consumer experience? So is the experience that people are having as a candidate, and we were talking back years ago, candidate, customer, employee, all the same, they're still human. And what they wanted to do is quantify, if we're delivering a poor experience to candidates, is this really impacting our business? And it just so happened that it did significantly, and was fact checked by their financial department with financial analysts, and it turned out it was several, 4.5, I mean, the numbers change, right, according to which case study, and people change it. But I don't know, it could be $4.5–5 million a year, which is a significant amount of money, which TA functions can influence.
And so that was done successfully?
That was done successfully, and they did some great work. I mean, they were able to measure it, they learnt from it, they were able to solve some of the challenges and continue to do that today.
But what did they do?
In what sense?
So how did they went from a poor, what was the great experience that they built?
Yeah, so I mean, Virgin did, they do a lot of kind of video content work. They do a lot of journey design work that they did. Their journey design stuff was really, really good. So they've done, it's a very Virgin-esque business. Mm-hmm. Virgin has a very specific tone and way in which they communicate with people. So they use that, they leverage that.
So they were known for their customer experience, and they just applied the same to candidates.
Yeah, but with a measurement. And I think that's the important thing, I think, from a TA point of view, which is historically, and still is in many companies, seen as a cost center, right?
Okay, so I think that's interesting. So measuring, not that the rest wasn't interesting.
Thanks, Ben.
So measuring the impact of candidate experience on, one, talent acquisition, and two, your customer.
And brand. I mean, it still is an impact whether you call it employer or consumer brand. There is an experience happening, and whether you like it or not, or whether you have control of it or not, or understand it or not, they're happening and unraveling right now. It's happening consistently through your TA hiring process. And either you control that or intentionally design them, or you just let them be default. And they may not be serving you well, or they could be serving you well or not so well. And I think that's the important thing. The lesson, I think, from Virgin was to listen, to really capture and listen to that audience and to understand their needs. I think that's a big one. Empathy.
Where does a TA start?
I think for me, the greatest thing you can do is research and to put aside all of your preconceptions, what you think people want, maybe your observations are valid, but often when you're building out a business case or you're trying to convince those outside of your TA bubble, for an example, in other parts of the organisation who don't get your world as much, who don't see what you see. And yes, of course, some will listen to you if you've got that relationship level. Some organisations need more convincing than others. It's so much better to come prepared with the voices of your candidates and say, it's not me saying it, it's actually these people. Or it could be our engineering talent. This is, I've discovered through research and listening and engaging with them, that these are some of the things that they need.
But isn't that what everybody does today?
No.
So what do people do today?
Not enough listening. There's too many assumptions and top-down thinking.
Okay, so I think like an interesting things that like recruitment people might be interested in is like, so where do I start in that research? Like because listen, like who do you listen to?
I think for me a good place to always start is either the low-hanging fruit. So it could be, have you got a particular talent group that's really hard to find or very, very difficult to engage, or you want more of? So of course, full stack engineers, that kind of stuff. Or you go the other way where you've got high volume, where there's opportunities then to refine that and make that more efficient. I think there's, from a research intervention or to capture insight, you can obviously do surveys, which are probably the most cost effective. You can set up a Typeform or a Google form, but also be very careful about what you're asking, and then especially asking for very specifically verbatim or comments back, because that's where the gold is. Somebody telling you you're a 3 out of a 5 doesn't tell you the reason why you're a 3 out of the 5. So for a start point, definitely that, and just engaging in surveys. And I think the other thing, someone asked me this the other week, was like when to ask, which is also an interesting one with surveys. Because there is, again, if you're not already surveying or asking questions along your hiring journey, there's a ton. I mean, just think about this. If you've got 2,000 applicants every month or 10,000 every month, just going through your talent process or hiring process is a ton of people and user groups that you can engage with. So at the top of the funnel, I mean, you probably all have this, you all have an ATS with auto responses. At the top of the funnel, your biggest audience is send a survey at that point. Just send a survey at that point, asking to learn more about your candidate groups. It's quite a simple thing to do. And you should be getting 80% response rates.
Because people want to go to the second phase.
Yeah. It's a wonderful time to ask people and just be open, right? Hey, listen, we want to learn more about you. We're really curious to learn more. We want to help you, but we need to understand you more.
So what kind of questions are we talking about here?
Wow, how long's a piece of string? It really depends on your research goals. So for an example, if you're looking to engage talent and to attract talent as an example, during the hiring process, then you of course want to know, okay, which channels would you engage with first when searching for a job? Which ones would be your secondary ones when engaging with a job, as a clear example? Another one would be, what kind of content would help you improve, what type of content would help you make an informed decision about whether this is a type of company I want to work for? It could be, what kind of format would you want that in? What kind of format do you look at? Is it more video? Is it more written? Is it more blog format, as an example? Start to understand the information or the content that people want to consume as part of their decision-making process. And actually, if you slice and dice that then by things like engineering group to sales group, you will see a difference. You will see a difference in the needs and wants of those two user groups. And then you can start to say, well, we didn't know that actually our engineering groups want to hear a bit more about career progression or the technology or whatever it might be. And then you can start to create content around that then you can start to deliver either higher up the funnel or during the recruitment process. Make sense? I mean, it's cool stuff. It's and that's just by listening and being curious and understanding those user groups. It's design-led for sure.
What I really like is what you're talking about is in a way rather quick to implement and has a higher guarantee of success because of where you're positioning that first survey at the top of the funnel. It still requires you to deal with that data.
It does.
Which is pretty overwhelming if you have 10,000 candidates.
Yeah, but there's some automated services now that you can run through. Nviva is one of those, NVIVA, I think it is, where you drop your verbatim and it will automatically go through all of that information and give you a sense of the topics and sentiment that people have shared out. So as the technology is getting the sentiment analysis now, verbatim analysis tools, we've moved on like leaps and bounds in the last 3 to 5 years on that side.
Is that what you call design thinking?
No, I mean design thinking. There's a lot being said about it. It's a growing area, has been for many years. Design thinking has been around for years, but I think it's become more widespread now into so many different parts of organisations. Employee experience specifically is a really hot one. But just to be clear, design thinking is not as big as everybody thinks it is. First and foremost, it's a mindset. It's a purely a mindset shift, and that was one of the things that I took from this. It's about
from what to what.
If I went back to my younger self, oh my God, to what you think you know as a leader, you don't know, and you would much rather you were much more informed about what you didn't know, so that you can make the right decision on certain things. So, for me, it's about empathy. It's about putting aside all of your assumptions, all of your preconceptions, your biases, and to empathize and really understand the perspective and situation that in this instance, your employees might be in, or your talent acquisition team, or your hiring managers. If we take this back to hiring for a minute, this is where I get a little bit frustrated with candidate experience, because we talk a lot about candidate experience. It's overused term. The problem with it is it only talks about candidate, and the candidate is only one person who touches that hiring journey or hiring process. There's also your hiring manager experience. There's also your resourcing TA team experience. And all of these experiences are shared and connected into a hiring journey. And the problem I think we have is we get too obsessed with candidate experience, but we don't empathize. We're not even empathizing enough with candidate experiences, never mind, how is our resourcing TA team doing? How can we empathize more with them? Do they have, what are their needs? What are their desires? What are we actually satisfying those as an organisation? And then you get to hiring managers, and then you talk about hiring manager needs, and there aren't many hiring managers who would truly stand up and go, I'm really crap at interviewing, because most of them are. Yeah. Because who trains them? No one. No, you're not born with this sudden passion and skill to interview correctly. A lot of people go by their gut instinct.
Yeah. Which creates a lot of biases, which probably also has a diminishing experience.
Yeah. So if you were to design think the hiring journey or hiring process, and that's the problem as well, processes are linear. They're step by step, which is a recruitment process. And that's cool. We need the process to keep us aligned. But the experience is a wholly different level. It's a wholly different layer, which is more human. It's more about people. And that's where design thinking, for me, is playing huge parts now in organizations, getting out of this systemic top-down thinking where the problems are identified in a senior leadership room, and the solutions are also decided inside a leadership room. So it starts at the bottom and listening. It's a really, really important one. So going back to your point with surveys, it's not the only one, but it's a good start to just start listening and start to identify some of those themes.
This is always very confusing, because like you said, a lot of people, they want to design a better candidate experience. Some of them have heard about design thinking, and at the core, understanding that it's about, like you said, empathy and listening. That becomes a tool to then create those experiences. I think the part that is difficult, the visualization aspect. Okay, I'm going to listen, I'm going to empathize, and you do it. Where does the rest come from?
Great question. So I think this is, again, using some of the toolkits from design thinking, because from your research phase, when you are listening, whether you do focus groups, for an example, whether you do one-to-one interviews, or whether you do then surveys. I mean, they're all different artifacts of research that you can then start to bring together, and then find the problems that really do exist in that particular area that you're focusing on. And that's the important part of research with the empathy and really understanding. So it's kind of just, putting it all on one side, capturing, finding the right problem, and then bringing that to life through things like journey mapping, bringing it to life through persona creation, stakeholder mapping, these types of things. And journey maps are not complicated. You can do them super easily. There's great templates in Muriel or Miro now, which you can use. Really easy to just bring it together, because then you've got a story and you can then start to build a story out, then to share out to those stakeholders that you then need to start influencing. And there's nothing better than bringing together some hard facts and data, because that talks to one side of certain stakeholders' brain. Then you've got a visualization of a journey map, and then you can very quickly showcase to them, here's where we're doing brilliantly, and actually we think we can do better here, but here's some of the areas that is actually impacting the experience or the perception of the organization. And you can do that in a really simple way.
Can we link some of those resources that you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. There, or there.
Can we try to do like a dumbed down summary for people like me? I'm a TA. I want genuinely to build a better candidate experience or a candidate experience. Can we do like 1, 2, 3?
1, 2, 3.
That's it.
Always in threes. You know what? Number one is just start small. So choose one talent group and decide, and that might be for a number of reasons. You have to decide on that, whether it's an engineering or sales or account exec, whatever it might be. Normally one where you can have where there is an issue, you can have an impact. The second one is build out and create, very simply, what is it you want to learn from them? And what kind of research goals when you've completed your research, what goals are you looking to achieve as part of that activity, whichever one you then decide, or various activities you decide to do. And then the third one for me is to delve into the data and identify one problem area on one part of the hiring journey, and look to then solve that particular one and then get an uplift. That would be
measure it
and then measure it again.
Get the result from that to potentially convince bigger stakeholders to
just start
to
scale it up. Here's one example that we've done, but I know from the research we've also identified we have a hypothesis, or we have a theory that actually these things are actually also impacting.
Which is hard, because I guess a lot of the time what happens is that the CEO or the head of HR might come to a TA and say, hey, build a better candidate experience.
Yeah, that can happen.
Here's €1,000, by the way.
Yeah. If I'll share this with you. If we just talk about candidate experience for a second, and this is done through research, and we actually did this as a test. We just did it for the love of it, not because we were making money, because we wanted to prove that the last year it was such a mess last year. You could see it in what's the website where people share stuff, their experience of company, Glassdoor. Oh. You could see in Glass. Sorry, you could. I was like, well, what? Yeah. Google. But you could see it on them, and it was a mess last year. We discovered. So we did in the morning. We had a group of people who were very grateful for their time. They shared some of the time. These were people who were actively in the market looking for work at the time. And they came along and joined this morning session because we wanted to walk through a hiring process with a group of candidates to understand their perspective of the market and what they're experiencing. And carnage was the word that I took from that research in the morning. It was utter carnage. And the most interesting thing, and I can't stress this enough, the level of emotion by some of those members, you could feel it in that session. There was it felt like a therapy session. One of them mentioned, my God, I'm so glad I came onto this session because I feel like I'm not the only one it's happening to. Another one was actually getting genuinely really angry about certain things. There was another one that felt like they were getting quite upset. And they were really strong, deep emotions that were going on. So it was really, really hurting people. Then in the afternoon, we then had a group of internal recruiters from various countries who also were very kind to share their time and came along. And we walked along the same hiring process, but from the lens of the recruitment teams. And that was also interesting because what we found was that the recruiting teams were overwhelmed, overworked, short-staffed, not enough resource, not enough time. So they were also feeling pain, but in a very, very different way. And what we also found was the biggest learning, I can please stress this to anyone listening to this today, is all roads led from the analysis that we did of the workshops, all roads led to the hiring manager. All roads led to the hiring manager. So candidate experience for me is, if you want some low-hanging fruit, is work on the relationship level between the TA function and your hiring manager population. Because that is where the biggest friction that then is actually impacting as an outcome on the candidate experience, because we're talking about now everybody's involvement here, is those organisations that have really, really close ties with between TA function and hiring managers bode much better than ones that are much more reactive and just more like, don't give them the time or the proper job briefing, or they change the job briefing, or they don't set interview dates in advance, or all of these kind of basic things that really should be set from the outset. And there's a number, it's way more complex than this. It's a number of things, recruiters perhaps aren't trained. It's the culture. They don't have confidence to control some of the hiring managers. Some hiring managers are better than others. From a hiring manager point of view, it's their perception of the TA function. I mean, you could go on, couldn't you? So
that's really interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot to do in that area. I think it's.
I should connect you with one of the CRI guy. There's a guy at CRI who really understands the partnership between talent acquisition and hiring managers. And at the beginning, I remember it was 8 months ago or so that I talked to him, and I didn't really understand that aspect of what you're describing right now, but it sort of starts to make sense where. Because it was all he was talking about was the relationship with the managers, and I was like, "What are you Why are you not talking about candidates?"
Yep.
And I guess he had figured it out.
I'll share with you, if it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll share with you. This is true. So when I had my recruitment company, we used to have a process, particularly during the job order process. So we used to have a 4-page job order form. So any client that we worked with. The first part, when we worked on a new job with a customer, is that we would spend at least an hour with the hiring manager. And we worked out over time through analysis that if HR recruitment didn't give us access to a hiring manager when we were taking that initial brief, the percentage ratio of our fill ratio would drop a little bit. And if they didn't give us a job order at all and just gave us a job spec, it would drop down even more. So we figured out that actually you have to get sign-off from the hiring manager, understand the company, understand the culture, understand the department, understand the strategy, understand the dynamics, understand the role. I mean, there's a lot to understand. That's as an external agency. Then when I started working more with in-house recruitment environment, or in the in-house recruitment environment, I was astonished that in-house recruiters find it difficult to pin down their own hiring managers.
Yep.
And to me, it's insane. It's insane because potentially even in the same building, I mean, not so much these days, but the importance of that job briefing and that starting with a clear strategy from the outset is it's enormous, and it affects I maybe talked, that might be something for in-house recruitment people to do actually, to measure the fill ratio between, I don't know, those that had a job order, those that didn't. So, but anyway, it's a big one.
I have I have 3 projects at the moment where I have shifted the project from employer branding as content that the company is going to publish on LinkedIn to employer branding as content that the hiring manager are going to be publishing on their own account,
Yep.
because they understand the candidate better than the talent acquisition team in terms of like the actual work. They understand, like, and so getting the hiring manager to be almost like the employer brand ambassador over the TA, over the even the company, more so that's my.
I think that's. And also maybe do have you seen hiring managers producing content for TA functions to help them from a talent engagement or candidate
Well,
engagement
they don't have
perspective?
time.
What, to pick up a mobile and do a quick 30-second for a role for an engineer?
No, I know.
Or for a role that they've had empty for 3 months and people are struggling in a tight talent market?
No.
Just saying.
Yeah. Obviously.
I think hiring managers can do so much more. But they're also vulnerable as well. I mean, they're just like anyone else, right? They're not like this God status thing. It's like they're just humans and they got their own challenges, of course. And that's the thing. If TA functions can understand that a bit more, so they understand their positions and understand their challenges. They may think they know, but maybe by asking them and saying, "Hey guys, what are your vulnerabilities when it comes to hiring? Do you have any? Like, what's going on? You know, is it more about you? Is it more about your skills, confidence? Do you have the toolkits to hire the right people? Do you even understand LinkedIn? Because some of them don't. Not everyone's on LinkedIn."
Yeah.